On the day the company went public, Darnell announced his engagement to his first love. I went from being the future queen to a complete outsider. Since that was the case, I decided to let the whole company fall apart. The CEO was short on funds, so he asked me to find some venture capital. I let things slide, and the company's finances broke down. The CEO lacked new products, so the technical director slacked off, and big clients pulled their orders. The CEO lacked talent, so the HR director did nothing, and top talents were poached by the competition. On the day of the listing ceremony, I dressed up and waited for the CEO to call me up to ring the bell on stage. The Flower and Atmosphere teams were already in position. The long-awaited moment finally arrived, and CEO Darnell reached his hand out toward the audience. I gracefully stood up. But instead of calling my name, Darnell called out the name of another woman. I froze in place. Who is she? I'm embarrassed for her. She's so pretty, yet so shameless. She clearly wasn't called, and yet she acts like she was. It's her. I heard she's just a secretary, but she acts like she's the boss's wife. Look, the woman walking up to the stage is the real boss's wife. My nails dug into my skin as I stared at the stage. One woman was wearing a blue dress, the other a blue tie. Their eyes locked, and it felt like they were connected by invisible strings. They clasped hands and struck the gong to mark the listing. The assistant tugged at my dress, and I slowly sat down. Darnell gave a subtle look to the Atmosphere team, who hesitated, then, under the pressure, pulled the ribbon. The stage was buzzing with excitement. The assistant's roses were forcibly taken from her and given to that woman. Great, just great. I worked hard for 3 years, and someone else reaped the rewards. After the ceremony, everyone attended the celebration banquet. My colleagues, seeing the woman in Darnell's arms, stared wide-eyed. For 3 years, Darnell and I were inseparable, and everyone had long assumed I would be the future CEO's wife. Who was this woman who appeared out of nowhere and took my place? Their stares were obvious, and Darnell's and that woman's mutual friends couldn't stand it. What's wrong with you all? Ella is Darnell's first love. They made a pact that if neither of them were married by 27, they'd be together. Exactly. They're perfect for each other. All the colleagues were awkward, embarrassed. From across the room, I gazed at Darnell, waiting for an explanation. He raised his glass. Leona. Thank you for your support these past 3 years. As always, the company will always have a place for you. Ella raised her glass with him. Thank you, Miss Leona, for taking such good care of Darnell. Darnell and I had the same mentor. He was my senior. He started his business early and had some success. He reached out to me, inviting me to join him. He promised I'd have a stake in the company in the future. After 3 years of grad school, our relationship had grown. I had feelings for him, so I didn't hesitate to turn down a job offer from a large company and joined his studio. Over the next 3 years, his special treatment of me became clear to everyone. He hinted countless times that once the company went public, we would be forever tied together, leading a happy life. I had underestimated the power of first love. When the person's gone, the money still matters. I raised my glass. No need for formalities. Why don't we discuss the new contract? The company's been listed, and the promises made should be in writing now. Let's not talk business today. Come to my office tomorrow. After 3 years of working together, Darnell's methods always amazed me, including this one. He only gave me 1% of the shares. I treated the company like it was my own, negotiating hard for investment just to retain the management rights and a larger stake. All that effort, and yet, I got nothing in return. I stood up slowly, a bright smile on my face. Are you sure? Of course. The company will grow, and this 1% is not insignificant. Before even becoming a renowned capitalist, he had mastered the art of exploitation. Fine, I'll slack off now. Let Darnell see just who's truly indispensable to the company. I didn't sign the contract, saying I needed to think it over. Darnell didn't mind. He made a phone call, and as he was closing the door, I heard his soft voice, "I'll pick you up after work." How sweet. Back in my small office, my assistant immediately came over with the information she had gathered. The woman was called Ella, and she was Darnell's high school classmate. She was the campus belle, and he was the campus heartthrob, perfect for each other. But back then, Darnell was just a poor high school student. He relied on scholarships and financial aid, wearing a faded shirt, his figure the object of many girls' fantasies, though very thin. At that time, they could be classmates. They could be close friends. But they couldn't be lovers. Because Darnell's pride wouldn't let him confess his feelings when he couldn't promise a bright future. After high school, Ella went abroad to study, leaving behind a pale moonlight that shone on his heart, urging him to work harder every night. Years passed, and Ella's life abroad wasn't easy, leaving some scars. Darnell, however, was the one to wipe away those clouds and bring her back into the light. I could feel my teeth clenching, and my heart ached a bit. My assistant shuddered. So this is the power of first love? I heard they're getting engaged soon. Leona, aren't you going to do something? No rush. I calmly sorted through the materials and made dinner plans with another VP from the company, Gavin. Gavin was also a classmate of Darnell and me. He joined the company 3 months after the studio started. He didn't do grad school and went straight to work. At his peak, he made $800,000 a year. He was one of the most successful from our year. But as he began to rise, he caught the eye of older employees. After several rounds of battles, he unknowingly stepped into a trap set by them, costing the company millions. When Gavin was floundering, this senior employee stepped in, using their connections to smooth things over. Gavin was deeply grateful and thanked him profusely. Later, he was kept under that employee's thumb, and much of his hard work was taken over by others. I had some connections at the company and heard about this. I thought about it for a long time and decided to tell Gavin. Gavin, young and brash, couldn't stand it. He confronted the senior employee head-on. But, unfortunately, he lost in the end. That night, Gavin dragged me and Darnell out to drink on the street. One bottle of liquor, with the loneliness of feeling like the world had left him behind. I couldn't bear it, so I encouraged him to join us and start his own business. Gavin paused, took a swig of his drink, and then agreed to join us. Not long after I extended the invitation, Gavin agreed. Back to that same street, where everything had changed. Gavin awkwardly drank, sigh. Even though we're from the same hometown, I didn't know about Ella. I forced a smile. Love is unpredictable. Let's not talk about that. Darnell didn't betray you, did he? Gavin froze, mumbling nothing. Darnell wasn't stupid. After that scene with me, he'd surely be wary of me. He'd moved faster than I thought. I pretended to be disappointed. Looks like he didn't break his promise. He even gave me the stock agreement, 1%. What? He only gave you 1%? You put in so much effort when the studio was just starting, investing money and time, and you contributed so much. I also have. Oh? So you mean he didn't give you any more than me? Nice one. I pinched my thigh, and the tears came unbidden. As long as he didn't wrong you. I'm just worried that he might neglect the people I brought in, and then how would I explain it to them? Gavin was choked up, feeling bad for me. I had a good relationship with him, but in life, relationships alone don't cut it. Even if he chose not to side with me for the sake of his own interests, I could understand. It was likely that others, not involved with me, had benefited in some way. Darnell had become harder to deal with. I'd been running my company for many years, capable of bending and adapting, and at that moment, I played the part of a fragile woman perfectly. I didn't cry about Darnell's change of heart. After all, things that seem like they could be true often aren't, and who can be certain? Instead, I cried about how love was no longer there, how even friendship couldn't last. What happens to me doesn't matter, but I feared that those close to me might be pushed out. Gavin probably wanted to say that they wouldn't be pushed out. But the 1% of shares on the contract? That was undeniable evidence. I cried for a while, then stopped when I felt it was enough. Gavin hurriedly offered to take me back. By chance, as we reached the bottom of my building, we ran into Darnell and Ella. Ella's face changed the moment she saw us. It was obvious she was imagining something unpleasant. I quietly whispered to Gavin, maybe you should keep your distance from me. One sentence triggered Gavin's rebellious instinct, and he insisted on walking me back. Just before the elevator doors closed, I saw Ella seem to say something to Darnell. Interesting. Darnell probably feared my influence in the company, along with his eager ambition to rise. Despite his usual reluctance to be in the spotlight, Darnell cooperated with Ella to publicly promote their romance online, finally meeting my first love. Those days, I couldn't figure out why, but everywhere I turned, people were talking about the impact of first loves. The first loves tear, and the current lover loses. I still can't forget her. Just one smile from her, and I'd give my life. It was everywhere on short video apps. My assistant looked at me with pity. Leona, do you think TK is monitoring us? Does he know we're losing to his first love? I quietly swiped on my phone, and big data pushed this. Hashtag I finally got my first love. The photo was of Darnell and Ella. They wore oversized school uniforms, looking like a poster for an idol drama, paired with a video of them running together and a narrative. She's the moon in the sky, a light beyond reach. I chased 99 steps, but lost to time and distance. I once thought I had no hope, but in the end, we met again. The two gazed at each other from across a crowd. I felt a mix of pain, anger, and disgust, and I slammed my phone down, then picked it up again. No, I had to see how far they would go with this. Next came Darnell's struggle to get closer to his first love, paired with the perfect background music, creating a tragic yet beautiful love story. Finally, they announced their engagement. They received everyone's blessings. My assistant watched me nervously, afraid I might explode. I sneered, realizing that the disgust I felt was more overwhelming than any sadness. Of course, I wasn't about to torture myself. The company had just gone public, and they weren't afraid of the truth being revealed and backfiring on them. My assistant analyzed, they probably want to make the first move, binding themselves together to completely push you out. Thinking it over, it did make sense. I made a mental note to get my revenge, sooner or later. As I expected, people close to me were being ostracized in the company. The atmosphere grew more tense by the day. Those who were on my side gathered in my office and asked what we should do. Without a second thought, I called for the new game console I had just bought. Stop working, let's play a few rounds. You're not worried at all? Worried? What's the point? Right. As we started the game, we talked. From them, I learned that Darnell was ruthless. He actually had his subordinates take over their business dealings. To put it nicely, it's sharing the load, but who doesn't know what he's really up to? The person taking over was someone I personally mentored. Luckily, I kept a backup plan, or I'd be out now. I smiled gently. Exactly, we've got our own cards to play. For now, let's just enjoy the show. We exchanged glances, silently agreeing to continue. Our subordinates came in to report, but we weren't paying attention, no signatures, no cooperation. Let's see what they'll do. Darnell wasn't angry at all. He encouraged us to enjoy the game, trying to take more power from us. Go ahead. We wouldn't hit bottom anytime soon. So, while others in the company worked late into the night, we clocked out on time. They held serious meetings, while we sipped afternoon tea. They argued endlessly over new products, while we sent each other funny video links. When the mood struck, we shared them in the company group chat, inviting others to watch. Before, I never wanted to abuse my position, but now that I had nothing to lose, I wasn't afraid. Darnell's forehead was covered in veins, and he asked me with frustration, "What's your attitude about this?" I paused my phone. What? Isn't this project mine to handle? If you want to yell at someone, it shouldn't be me, right? Darnell froze, and the entire meeting room fell silent. It wasn't because I was being unreasonable, but because I used to be extremely responsible. Almost every new product I would personally follow up on. I would repeatedly check if updates were necessary and control their frequency. If I didn't understand something, I'd pull all-nighters to figure it out. If Darnell didn't like a new product, I'd take the heat, bearing the responsibility alone. I was often scolded, but would still hear, "You're so amazing." Now? Not my problem. Darnell was stuck, and vented his anger on others. The people who got scolded looked at me with more heat in their eyes. Sure enough, not long after the meeting ended, the heads of several departments came knocking, asking for help with their projects. I was busy getting my nails done by my assistant and waved at them. No, it's your time to handle it, you should be more independent. But we don't understand Darnell like you do. I raised an eyebrow. You've got it wrong. The one who knows Darnell best is probably Miss Ella. Why don't you go ask her? They all looked defeated. Who didn't know that Darnell was underhanded? Back when he was flirting with me, now the company went public, and not only was I no longer the CEO's wife, but I didn't even have any shares. Even my title as vice president wasn't legitimate. They left in shame. My assistant spat, "They never understood your worth." Now? It's too late. I shrugged. They're still too inexperienced. What's Darnell? The market is what matters most. Every year, I lead a team to do market research. After all these years, how could they not know that the market is everything? They just didn't have the courage to confront Darnell, especially now. With my wide network, I soon heard that someone had gone to ask Ella. But she was an outsider and picked the worst proposal. The person could only swallow the bitter result in silence. The technical director and HR director quietly slipped in. The HR director worriedly asked, "Leona, when do we make our move? We have our own skills, but if this continues, resources will definitely be divided up. In the workplace, no one is irreplaceable." I held up my freshly done nails for them to admire. "Pretty, right? Green? What's that supposed to mean?" Wait for it. Darnell will come begging me soon enough. By the time the stock market closed that day, the company's stock was all in the red. The next morning, it was even worse, a glaring green downtrend. Darnell, busy with his engagement preparations, rushed back to the office and saw me playing games. His brows furrowed. "What are you doing? It's not the time to play." I glanced at him. The company wasn't mine, so why should I stress? What's wrong? The company's stock price is crashing. When there's a rise, there's a fall. Darnell was fuming, taking several deep breaths to calm himself. He announced they would hold a meeting to find the cause. I grabbed my laptop and headed to the meeting. As I passed the corner, the finance director gave me a thumbs up. She must have figured it out. I smirked, this was just a matter of time. The new company went public, and stocks always experience a round of price increases. But at some point, they always drop. However, the company's gains were small, but the losses were significant. Yesterday, it dropped by 5%, and today, it hit the daily limit. It's enough to worry retail investors. Darnell was so anxious that he got a mouth ulcer. What's going on? The others exchanged looks, but said nothing. Darnell turned to me again. What do you think is happening? It's normal. Retail investors love to buy into new stocks. After a certain period, they'll sell off. It's just how it works. Buying into new stocks means that investors, before a stock goes public, get a chance to buy shares through a lottery system via brokers. Once the stock lists, the price tends to go up. It's a guaranteed win, which is why so many experienced investors wait for this opportunity. There are even a lot of courses teaching how to buy into new stocks. These people aren't betting on the company's future, they're just after the profit. New stocks don't keep rising forever. Investors usually sell after a certain period, following established patterns, so the stock price naturally fluctuates when they sell. Is that really it? Darnell didn't believe me. I shrugged and didn't respond. Of course, there's more to it. Generally speaking, a company's post-listing performance directly impacts future investments. To ensure better future funding, I reached out to some connections and bought a few shares myself. At first, it was just to surprise Darnell, but now it's turned into my backup plan. I've never gotten along with Darnell, and when he and the related institutions noticed something was off, they pulled out in bulk. Could the stock price not drop? Another factor is a scandal that surfaced a few months ago, making the public skeptical about artificial intelligence. These three factors combined caused the stock price to plummet. After discussing it for a while, we figured out the reason. The only solution is to pull in more investment. Darnell looked at me. Do you have any? I shook my head, no. Darnell's usual tender, peach blossom eyes turned a little melancholy, and he dismissed the others. Like a few years ago, he lowered his voice and said, "Leona, I know you're upset, but..." A few years ago, Darnell had a more energetic aura. He was full of youthful vigor and stubborn pride, not letting anyone underestimate him. I rarely saw him lower his head, but when he did, it made it hard not to feel soft and want to give him everything. It was the same kind of day when he first asked me to join him in starting a business. It was lightly raining outside, and he saw me in a thin coat and gave me his jacket. That's when he spoke up. Darnell's brows were furrowed with worry about the future, but his eyes showed a quiet confidence that he could make it work. There was a hint of pleading, like a fragile puppy. I blinked. The scene overlapped with that moment years ago, then slowly faded apart. No matter how similar, it was still different. "Mr. Darnell, it's you who's being unreasonable, not me." Darnell gritted his teeth. "Fine, if you won't help me, I'll find someone else. Don't think the company can't survive without you." He turned to seek out the financial director, who was someone Darnell had personally hired. Usually, he had little contact with me. Darnell was pleased about that. He even told me that the financial director liked to work alone and that I should avoid bothering him. At the time, I felt relieved not having to hire people one by one. Looking back, though, he was clearly trying to keep me out. But I wasn't completely unprepared. Let's wait and see. Darnell miscalculated. Though the financial director had connections, he rarely interacted with investors. Several attempts had no effect. I thought Darnell would hire a big industry name, but instead, he ended up turning to his first love. Ella studied finance abroad, and in this industry, connections are key. But nothing beats the local bias. She couldn't get close to the core people overseas, so she came back. Here, her family's small company hasn't even gone public, and even though she works in investment banking, how much investment could she really pull in? I was afraid of underestimating her, so I had someone check. Ella's sources were surprisingly good. She entered the company and, with a smirk, challenged me, "Miss Leona, are you afraid I'll take your position?" I just smiled and didn't answer. Honestly, no. Competing with her? I was afraid it would lower my status. But Ella saw it as me being unable to back up my words, so she laughed even more. "I'll prove to you that I'm the one who's most suitable for Darnell." "Fine, I'm waiting." I challenged her, playing the role of the villain. "You better follow through. It's hard to attract good investment, especially here, where deals are mostly made over drinks." Ella couldn't handle it. She called in a few people for help, but they didn't cooperate, making everything even worse for her. Darnell came running to me again, looking desperate. "Leona, can't you? The company is yours too." I sighed. "What do you mean mine? I'm just an employee getting a paycheck." Darnell was speechless. He tried to pressure a few of my team members with the work, but they were just like me, completely giving up. In the past, we thought the company would never let us down, so we worked ourselves to the bone. But now, with the company listed, Darnell didn't even give me the shares he promised. Not only that, but no one in my department got a pay raise. Who would want to work hard now? Who knows, maybe Darnell will fire us all one day. Darnell couldn't get to me, so he hurried off to have dinner with investors. My assistant, feeling wronged, muttered, "He's really bullying you." I waved my hand. "Come on, everyone, let's go eat." "It's on me." The restaurant? It was, of course, the same place where Darnell was negotiating with the investors. The waiter led us to a private room next door. We intentionally left the door open, glancing over every now and then. Not even half an hour later, Ella came out with red eyes. My assistant chuckled. Did she get taken advantage of? Just as the words left their mouth, the room next door exploded. After asking around, it turned out that the investor had been dishonest, making advances, and even touching Ella's leg while drunk. Ella couldn't take it and ran off. Darnell, who had waited nearly 10 years for his first love, couldn't stand it either. In a fit of rage, he smashed a beer bottle over the investor's head. I couldn't help but feel excited. I thought the worst thing I'd see today was Darnell drunkenly embarrassing himself, but now, this was a real show. I paused and decided to call the police. When the police arrived, the private room was completely quiet. Darnell's eyes were a little red. "Leona, did you do that on purpose?" Staring at the broken beer bottle, I almost laughed out loud. "Do that on purpose?" "I was trying to save you." "Do you really think you can hit the investor and walk away scot-free?" I wasn't exaggerating. Things like this happen more often than you'd think. How many people stay rational after drinking? The investor's people were already trying to hold him down and force him to apologize. Darnell's first love was just crying. What else could she do? Darnell, with his bruised face, mumbled, "Sorry, I misunderstood you." Ella stood beside him, performing the "I feel sorry for you" routine. The police couldn't hold back their laughter. "Hurry up and take him to the doctor. We still need to take statements." "Ah? But they said it was you who started it." I couldn't be bothered with them, leading my team out with a flourish. That night's events shattered the calm that had been in place. Darnell's not stupid. He quickly hired a team to focus on attracting investments. Ella became the leader of the team and, in a twist, was promoted to vice president. I was so angry I almost laughed. I called my dad and played the spoiled daughter card, and he and his students helped spread the word about Darnell's ingratitude. When the news broke that he had been taken away by the police for hitting someone, the stock price took another plunge. It was another meeting. Ella's eyes were filled with resentment. "Did you spread that news?" Before I could say anything, my assistant sneered, "Who needs us to promote it? Who doesn't have a phone these days? They just snap a picture and upload it." Darnell looked at me, disappointment in his eyes. "Leona, how did you become like this? Can't you understand? It was a passerby who uploaded it. They didn't know you at all. If you hadn't been so eager to market The Last Love, there wouldn't be so many pictures of you two online. Who wouldn't recognize you now? The stock price was already in a volatile period. Couldn't you just hold off for a bit?" Darnell had no argument and fell silent again. Ella looked at me with even more hatred. It was her own fault. I had originally planned to suggest they hire a PR team to clear up the reason for his police station visit. But seeing them like this, I decided against it. I kept rallying people to play games, enjoying myself, and basking in the bliss of doing nothing. Ella wasn't entirely useless. She found an investor. But the investor wanted a 30% stake without participating in management. The shares that had been distributed earlier already accounted for 20%, the publicly listed shares another 20%, and now another 30%. Darnell was nearly being pushed out. Darnell was reluctant and asked if I had any solutions. "No," I glanced at Gavin, "if the shares keep getting diluted, you might as well just sell." Gavin's eyes flickered, and he cast a dissenting vote. Darnell didn't give him many shares to begin with, and if more went to the investor, Gavin's shares could be bought back. He wasn't willing to let that happen. With me as the unlucky first target, Gavin wasn't about to trust Darnell. Ella didn't believe me. "You must have a solution. Your parents have such a wide network." "Leona, I know I've been wrong, but feelings are hard to control. Before Darnell met me, he must have thought about being with you for the rest of his life." She was implying that I was Darnell's second choice. "Darnell?" I leaned back. "You're right, I do have a solution." The three of them looked at me, their eyes bright. Ella was happy but also worried. "I can give you anything, except..." Her gaze drifted toward Darnell. "Please. I'm not that hung up on him. My condition is 20% of the shares. Once I get what I'm owed, I'll work hard." Darnell and Ella were reluctant. I wasn't in a rush, so I went to the rooftop. Sure enough, Ella secretly came to find me. "If I were you, I wouldn't come. Darnell's got a mouth, but he's too proud to give it up easily. And remember, when a man is sweet, don't forget how cruel he can be. I helped him for 3 years, from nothing to the top. And now, he won't even give me money. What if one day he stops loving you? How do you think he'll treat you?" Ella's eyes were full of complexity. "Are you trying to drive a wedge between us?" "No, I'm just giving you a woman-to-woman warning. Fighting over a man is really not worth it." Ella stood there, frozen. I kept working my usual schedule. She wasn't stupid, but she might not be able to take my words to heart. What I didn't expect was that Ella managed to convince her family to put money forward, wanting to use the cash to compensate me. Clever. She took the money, asked for shares, and got my help, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. "You put in 100,000 to start the business, and now we'll pay you back 1 million. 100 times return in 3 years, sounds like a good deal. But the company was worth more than that." I didn't agree. I smiled and said, 20 million, or forget it. 20 million. You're robbing us. Or give me 20% of the shares. They were so mad they were about to explode but couldn't do anything to stop me. I ate a hamburger in front of them. It was delicious. I hadn't eaten one in 3 years, maintaining my elite white-collar image, but it felt great to finally break that. The more I ate, the more I enjoyed it, and the angrier they looked. Ella hesitated for a long time before saying, "We don't have that much money. You can use shares to offset it." Ella was sharp. She offered shares from her family's company, 35%. Though her family's company wasn't publicly listed, it was profitable, and it had potential in its traditional industry. I didn't agree immediately but also asked for 5% of Darnell's company's shares and $10 million before I relented. Less than 3 days later, an investment came knocking. They wanted shares too, but they were much better than the investors Ella had lined up. The stock price started to recover. Just as Darnell was breathing a sigh of relief, Gavin had more issues on his side. The new product was failing. How could this happen? Darnell was in a panic, abandoning Ella, who was trying on wedding dresses, and rushing back. Gavin was helpless. The software's fine, it's the chips that are the problem. The company focused on smart home devices and AI, releasing several successful products. The chip we used was developed by one of my dad's students. He ran his own company, which partnered with ours. In the past, thanks to my dad's connections, we got priority access to the best chips. But now, with Darnell treating the teacher's daughter like this, who would still sell to him? Ella started crying. "You just don't want me to be with Darnell." I rolled my eyes. "Stop it. Aren't you two soulmates? Nothing should be able to break you apart." Ella couldn't argue with me, so she went to see Darnell. No one knew better than he did how important I was to the company. He didn't dare to offend me again. Darnell rubbed his forehead. "Tell HR to hire new talent." The HR director was my person, so naturally, she refused to cooperate. Even if she wanted to, in our newly listed company, we couldn't attract top talent. Darnell was helpless, and unwilling to come beg me, so he told Gavin, the vice president and technical director, to work on a new product. It's easy to talk when you're not the one doing the work. Even Gavin couldn't stand him. He grumbled, then lazily added, "In the past, the three of us worked hard together. Now, it's all for one woman." I remained indifferent. Gavin awkwardly said, "Leona, I know you've been wronged, but the company is also yours now." I paused my online shopping and laughed. "I have my dignity too." Gavin immediately looked embarrassed and smiled. "Guess I deserve that." "You still remember what I said back then?" "Of course I remember. Gavin, we're alumni, and look at where we are now. Even if I help out with this, Darnell might not even appreciate me." Gavin's face filled with guilt. "I really didn't think. Staying in my office for too long, you'll probably be in danger too." Gavin turned pale, stood up to leave, then came back and sat down again. He didn't hide anything from me anymore and told me that after Ella caught him that night, Darnell had tested him a few times. I just don't get it. After all these years of friendship, it can't compare to his first love? Is friendship really less than love? I objectively assessed, he's afraid you'll side with me. Gavin's emotions surged in his eyes before he finally laughed. "At least you're straightforward. I'm done struggling, let's just mess things up together." I laughed. "Sure, we'll eat meat and drink together from now on." Gavin was completely on my side now, and even the people who had been making a fuss earlier had lost their energy. When the leader gave up, everyone followed suit. That's right. Darnell, thinking he could attract talented people, didn't cancel his engagement party and went ahead with it. Ella's smugness was almost overflowing from her eyes. She even personally handed me an invitation and insisted that I must come. "By the way, thanks for the reminder. He invested in my company, and my company invested in his. We're completely tied together now. Congratulations." Ella punched the air in frustration and left. I took the CFO, Megan, with me to meet my brother. We had different surnames, one took Dad's, the other took Mom's, and we didn't even go to the same elementary school. Most people wouldn't even know we were related. My brother works in finance, leveraging Mom's connections and doing really well. As soon as we walked in, Megan went up and kissed my brother. It's no wonder Darnell has a sharp eye for talent. He's built his business at the right time and hired great people. Megan, his CFO, not only went to a prestigious school, but also has a boyfriend in finance. Darnell must have been attracted to Megan's background when he hired her. The thing is, he didn't know Megan's boyfriend was my brother. My brother, wanting to test him, had Megan hide her connection to me. But it turns out, Darnell didn't live up to expectations. My brother wrapped his arm around his girlfriend's waist and said, "Your taste is terrible. Yeah, he's using your sister as a stepping stone. You should teach him a lesson." "Fine. I'll give you money. You take him down yourself." I happily agreed. The launch of the new product hit a snag, and Darnell was getting more and more anxious. A few days later, rumors spread that Darnell wasn't really focused on running the business. When the walls fall, everyone pushes. We had made a lot of enemies in the business world. Someone, no one knew who, leaked photos of me and Darnell looking very close. People, always eager for gossip, dug up our relationship and it exploded online. She gave him the wrong signals, got him to give her connections, and then kicked him to the curb when the company went public. First loves are ruthless, they know how to take all the credit. Things escalated. Someone dug up the fact that the promised new products hadn't been released before the company went public, which led people to suspect something was wrong. Then there were anonymous leaks claiming Darnell and Ella couldn't stand me. But the company's success was largely thanks to me. The company started to look shaky, like it could fall apart any minute. The stock price plummeted again, and the engagement party had to be cancelled. Darnell's company, deeply tied to Chen's, was dragged down with him. Ella blamed Darnell for holding him back, and he wasn't having it. They argued fiercely. What was once love now turned into knives thrown at each other, with every hurtful word stabbing deep. I couldn't help but laugh. This was so satisfying. While the internet was ablaze, I was enjoying a peaceful life at home. Maybe the heavens thought I wasn't happy enough, so they sent someone to entertain me. Just as I was making tea, Darnell showed up, holding roses, standing in the blazing sun, begging me for mercy. "Leona, I was wrong, I was blind." I cut him off. "And then what? What are you going to do to make up for it?" Darnell was in disbelief. You too?" I found it amusing and clapped my hands. Several handsome men stepped out. "See, these are the kind of things you can only get with money. You said I'm all about money, but if you didn't have it, you wouldn't have dared approach your first love, right? Also, for these 3 years, let's say I've been humoring you. But now? You're tainted, and I'm done." Darnell's eyes turned red. "How can you insult me like this? It's your own doing." Darnell had no choice but to accept my conditions for buying the company. "Can't the price go up a little?" "No," I shrugged. "Didn't you say you don't care about money?" In the end, I bought the company at a ridiculously low price and turned the tables. Everyone congratulated me, but I felt a bit embarrassed since I had just used them for my own advantage. Thankfully, they didn't mind. Just after Darnell left, Ella came back. Her eyes were also red, and she accused me of tricking her. "You never wanted to let me off, did you? This was all your setup, wasn't it? My company is going bankrupt." She wasn't wrong. I had been planning this from the start. I knew the stock price would drop, so I had someone give Ella the idea to tie her company's shares to Darnell's. Then, I convinced my dad's student not to supply the chips. The new product was delayed, Gavin faced obstacles, and there was all that mistrust between them. In the end, everyone stopped working. I admitted it openly. Ella cried in anger. "Didn't you say, the new age woman? Stop. When you stole my man, I didn't do anything to you, did I? Men can be given to you, but not money." Ella, helpless, tried to sell her company to me. But I wasn't interested. 30% of the shares were enough. I'm not someone who takes just anything. Later on, the new product was re-released, and both companies went through a joint restructuring, bringing in new investments, and everything was revitalized. I gave bonuses to the key personnel in the company. The company made a profit, and everyone who qualified went on a company-paid trip. My partners talked about Darnell and Ella, how their reputations were ruined, and how nothing seemed to work for them. Once you go from humble beginnings to wealth, it's easy, but going back to poverty is hard. The money from selling their company wouldn't even last them a year. They couldn't find better people, so they had to settle, constantly fighting and disgusted with each other. After we enjoyed our schadenfreude, we raised our glasses and smiled at each other, for the future, for ourselves, to keep pushing forward. A night of wild celebration. I was leaving the toxic man behind, and life was going to get better. The early sun was warm, the days were long, and the seasons were beautiful. And,